Hello, and welcome to the Maple Moon podcast. This is your host, Connie. Now, I'm going to begin with a journal entry because I've started a new journal. My old one I started on the 10th of February and I just finished it a couple of days ago. So we are going to start with the very first journal entry in here. So it says, "This is the new journal. I had a dream about a bunch of us being drugged in order to create pieces of fiction. We had to decide between two bus shelters. Then at the end, they wouldn't shortlist my piece, but for some reason they had me take an exam. I think I wrote a play for mine. My head is all over the place right now. I have started reading Anthony Trollope's The Way We Live Now. It's excellent so far. On another note, I have been feeling quite angry. I just see people for who they are on the inside, as opposed to the mask they present to the outside. It's a frustrating quality to have because nobody believes you." Now, today, what I want to talk about is really the issues going on right now in the writing scene, because my friend Rebecca Kenny, who runs Written Off Publishing, put a post out on Instagram, which I will link in the show notes, which says, as I'm reading out now, "We need to talk about how the art scene is actively harming marginalised people." And so she put some screenshots up from some articles that have come out about, like, for example, the one from What's on the Stage, which said the majority of creative jobs go to friends or contacts in quote-unquote closed process. But this is what Rebecca says on the actual post. It says, "Right now, the art scene feels rather bleak for a great number of people. Arts Council England funding for literary endeavours that benefit the most marginalised in society has dried up for all but a small number of people. This has led to the closure of many small presses who have shut down under the financial pressure of publishing, with tiny platforms and no access to wider support. Most of these presses are run solely or partly by women. Many of them are disabled. I'm going to be honest, we are on the same track. I'm exhausted. The system feels futile. I feel as if we are being held in an invisible spot because nobody wants to admit the state of things right now. Prices are up and we can't get a foot in the door. The most impacted by these cuts are the people served, marginalised people." There's more screenshots. "This year I've given up half of all my weekends to markets because social media isn't amplifying our posts anymore. This is despite us, quote, playing the game, unquote, paying for ads, a blue tick, trial reels, and other things that seem to work for other companies. I do all of this alongside my full-time job. We have over 4,000 followers, but our posts rarely top 1,000 views. Posts about our writers and their lives are the least viewed of all our posts. When I do markets, I get the same question every time. How do I not know about you? And honestly, I don't have an answer. I know it's not the quality of our work. At the Northern Publishers Fair, we are overwhelmed by visitors to the point we needed 4 volunteers to man our last stall to handle all the sales. At markets, people make a beeline for us. We consistently sell well. We often sell out of copies at Pride events. Markets keep us afloat. People are drawn to our beautiful covers and they stick around because once they pick up the book that speaks to them, they see themselves reflected back. It's a beautiful moment to witness someone saying, hey, this could be about my life. I can only do so many markets though. I'm missing seeing my child grow up. I'm all for the hustle, but I have to ask, why is it only a hustle for some of us? I cannot physically give any more of my time to Written Off. I'm a mother. I have a full-time job. I'm currently in ADHD medication titration. I'm chronically ill and have chronic pain. I don't take pay for my work with the press and never have, and right now I'm also relying on help from volunteers. That has been, as you may well have seen, unstable, because most of our volunteers are actively looking for work, and because I can't pay them, they can't commit long term. Paper costs are up, website costs are up, Zoom costs are up, printing costs are up, postage costs are up. Everything is costing more, and yet we are more shadow banned than ever. If I didn't do markets, we'd have already shut down. Which brings me to my point: for most, the arts scene is now dependent on goodwill, and it's marginalised people who are having to sacrifice the most. Can't travel to gigs? Tough. Use a wheelchair? Sorry, our venue is basement and there's no lift. Don't have connections in the media? Sorry, it's highly likely we'll never open that press release. Can't access the wildly convoluted funding forms? Sorry about that. I'm hearing more and more from people who simply cannot access the arts because they don't have the money or the means or the connections. And now that funding has dried up, especially for publishers, there is no safety net or help for them. This creates a scene that lacks diversity and inclusion, and actively ostracizes the voices that need and deserve to be heard the most. This is an act of violence. When Emily from Quernica Press posted about the state of things a couple of weeks back, I realised I hadn't seen any of their posts in months. It was the same for them, they weren't seeing us either. This isn't isolated. Some of our biggest supporters don't get fed our work. Other presses don't see us. Potential customers don't see us. The mainstream media don't even open our emails. The safety net of connection for those who need it has been cut, and the system is slowly becoming a game of who you know, not what you know, at a worse level than ever before. Success, it seems, is now reserved for the already well connected. We cannot allow a scene to exist if it can only exist in an inaccessible way. It feels as if amplification is being given out based on some arbitrary algorithm that can't break through. Social media plays a part. Right now, it's posts from endeavours run by white cis men that are pushed to me the most, despite being the smallest sector of the accounts I follow. Presses and other endeavours by gypsy, Romani, and traveller writers or black artists are pushed the least. They simply don't appear. They're all posting, it's just that it isn't amplified by the algorithm. A limited bit of research tells me this isn't just happening for me, it's happening widely. The people who need to see themselves reflected in literature, the ones who need our writers' words the most, can't find us. The media don't platform us. Now funding streams are following suit. I'm saying this now because I fear we're becoming complacent. Marginalisation isn't a competition, but likewise we should be noticing how the most vulnerable voices are accessing the fewest opportunities because the endeavours to support them, can't get funding. I've been fighting this fight and paying the bills for 4 years now. I've never seen it so bad. The whole scene feels dog eat dog. There's very little community anymore. We are all too busy trying to scrape by. I want to do better, and I cannot describe the frustration of not being able to because I cannot break through the gatekeepers. We are doing important work. Why isn't it seen? When I started Ben Key, it was because I wanted to rock the boat, break the stigma, and create change in the industry. It is demoralising to be 4 years in to see nothing really change. We need you readers more than ever, not just us, all arts endeavours for marginalised people. I'm so effing tired. It's only jobs for the boys until it isn't. Community matters, and now is the time to support the tiny unfunded businesses who are breaking their backs to deliver art to you. Please show the world that we are not only wanted but needed. With love, Rebecca Kenny. Now, that is a real sad state of affairs, isn't it? Honestly, things are really severely bad right now. And that's why I wanted to do this particular podcast, because me and Rebecca have been discussing this a lot over the last week, because there are certain people who come out and pretend that, all this arts funding, you know, certain privileged people get 15 grand here and there. They get on BBC Radio 4. they get a two-page spread in The Guardian. But that's not real life. It's a fairy tale. That's only for certain people. The arts funding, they claim to be about arts, the Arts Council. They are not. They are not doing what they set out to do right now. They're really not. Because I asked Rebecca not long ago about, I was considering applying for funding for something, and I asked her, how do you go about it? And when she explained the actual hoops you have to jump through just to even get the funding, I was absolutely shocked. Now, of course, I didn't expect it just to be like, hi, can I have some money, please? Yes, here you are. Obviously not. But the amount of information you have to provide is ableist. Look, right, Rebecca's chronically ill. I'm chronically ill. I don't have the energy for this kind of thing, but I need the funding. I need money. To be quite frank, I really need money. So, you know, I suppose when you see people on social media talking about please donate, it's because we're all struggling. I say if you can donate to this podcast and this platform, and if you like my work, please donate because we really need the money. I've been doing this professionally for 8 years now, and I've barely made £100 in total in 8 years. And not for lack of trying or hard work. I've been every single day for 8 years straight, and specifically when the pandemic started, those 5 years, every single day I've been doing something towards writing, whether that's writing, submitting, finding opportunities, doing open mics. I've been doing everything I can and barely make £100. Yet, for some reason, BBC Radio 4 will platform privileged people with this success story about the small press. Yet, the small presses I actually know can't get funding. They're not getting articles written about them when they specifically need it because this is a problem in the industry. But for some reason, the big dogs, The Guardian, BBC Radio 4, will only reward those who have the backing of certain organisations. To have 50 grand donated to you as a small, quote unquote, what I am saying here, press, to have billboards put up in city centres is unprecedented. That is big publishing money. That is secret funding money. That is, backdoor, underhanded tactics money. That is not reality. Now, Rebecca Kenny at Written Off Publishing and people like her and Quernica and Emily Quernica and just everybody in the small publishing sector deserves that funding. They deserve the funding that is given to the privileged. I see the work she does. I see the work everybody does. I know the work I do. And what do we get? Zero. We all have bills to pay. Rebecca has a child. People have kids. People have people to look after. Being chronically ill, things have gotten really quite bad for me right now. So a bit of money would go a long way. My circumstances have changed recently and things are really quite tough. Before, for example, it was once a no-brainer. If I needed a new notebook, it was just I would get a new notebook. Now, I've had to wait ages to get this new notebook, and that's £20. Do you see what I'm saying? Things are really bad in this country with the arts, as it is, with the government, trying to downplay the importance of the arts as well. You know, we keep being told what they call it, Mickey Mouse degrees. Now, I'm not necessarily for the formal English. I have my problems with the education system, but the actual importance of the arts itself is being downplayed by those in positions of power. But also just the fact that I keep seeing on Instagram these, you know, people who are privileged talking about, oh, well, if I can do it, you can too. We don't all get £15,000 from the T.S. Eliot Foundation. And we should, for that matter. And do not mistake this podcast as bitter, because it is not about bitterness. This is about getting what people deserve. The arts is notoriously underfunded, and it always has been. But I'm talking about the writing sector in this one. But it is not fair. The same people win the same competitions over and over again, who have, you know, already had books with big presses. It'll be somebody who's got a book with Faber, you know. They'll have a book with Faber, but then they'll suddenly win the biggest competition of the year, you know, the National Poetry Society. They have a poetry competition every year. You know, £5,000 is the prize fund for the top prize. And the poet, you know, the people that win it, I've made my criticisms about it for the last 2 years. You can read those articles. But what we need is funding and people to speak up and not be afraid of losing jobs. Because what I've noticed is that people stay quiet because they want in on these journals who have got, you know, backing from T.S. Eliot Prize. But who cares? Being blacklisted from this little magazine is worth it if we're going to continue to have journals at all. Journals are not going to exist anymore if we don't adequately fund them. Now, I'm not good at maths, okay? I cannot give facts and figures for you, but Rebecca certainly can, as someone who runs a press, and prices of books and making them are going up. You know, papers going up, and not just that people don't have the time, people are not getting adequately paid because everything is stacked against small presses, and it always has been. You know, we keep talking about how we've moved on, you know, and self-publishing. But even now, it's like these books you hear about where they were self-published and then picked up. You know, the publishing houses, they can't be asked. They can't be asked to take chances, you know, and actually do stuff for the arts like they always say they will do. No, someone self-publishes a book, it gets really popular, which is somehow a surprise to everybody. And then, I know, look, Penguin will pick it up. HarperCollins will pick it up. They will pick up these books because, they're suddenly popular, but we couldn't take a chance on them. We didn't want to. We don't want to do the legwork. You know, we don't want to do the legwork despite having loads of money. Richard Osman, okay? He spoke about recently on the Resident Team podcast, a podcast I've previously enjoyed. In some respects, there are a lot of things I disagree with, but one thing I do disagree with is that he said, basically, to tell publishers from him that you don't need social media to sell books, you just need to go around the country and do a few book signings. Now, Mr. Osman, that's all well and good when you're you and you have so much money and so much social standing and so an actual, apparently, you know, whole marketing system at your publishing house. People are actually hired to work for the Richard Osman marketing sector. And not just that, plenty of us are disabled and also cannot afford to just travel around the country and do book signings. And even then, that's not enough. You know, my name is Courtney Shenbury Gray, okay? And to some people, that might mean a small amount. But for most people, they're not going to turn up. Courtney Shenbury Gray, who's that? I wish my name was as noticeable as yours, but it's not. I'm not notable. So to say that is the epitome of privilege, and to say that on your podcast, which has, I don't know the facts and figures, but thousands of views and listeners at the very least, is just, it's just egregious. And it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what exactly goes on in the arts, but the arts behind the glass, beneath the glass ceiling. We're not out there in Hollywood and, putting our Rebecca, for example, is not putting her press releases in the hands of celebrities and taking photos and saying, oh, Brad Pitt here with, a book from Written Off Publishing. Who is getting that opportunity unless you have connections? And that's not afforded to the marginalised. It's not afforded to the chronically ill, the disabled, POC, every marginalised person. It's not afforded to us. And I'm neurodivergent as well. So, not only that, chronically ill, this is why I have enough poems to probably release a collection, but you know why I haven't? Because that would mean I have to promote it. Because obviously we don't get the funding. I don't have the money. And I can't actually promote it properly because I'm chronically ill. So I don't bother. The poems sit in my documents right here if they're not getting sent out to journals and rejected all the time. They sit in this notebook that I've just started. Last night I started a short story. Elba Funk lit the bonfire using her father's magnifying glass. And there it will stay. I might write another story in a bit or the same one and just rejig it, but it will stay in this red notebook here. Because what's the point? I am at a loss with the business. I am a good writer, okay? I really enjoy the stuff that I write, otherwise I wouldn't do it. People are good writers. Rebecca is a good publisher, but we are not getting the credit or the funding we deserve. And I don't care what anybody says about the world doesn't owe you anything. The arts creates jobs. It enriches society. This writing we do, okay? Think about it this way: Wordsworth, Shakespeare, so many 100 years, and we still talk about his work. His work is foundational to what we do. And you say that's not important? The world certainly owes the arts a lot more than it's giving it. And this government that will downplay the arts all the time because it teaches you how to think, it teaches you empathy. This government, they hate people who are educated in empathy. That is precisely what they despise. They hate that we are educated, we write stories to create empathy. Those quotes they say in Parliament come from people who have read so many different books. But the ultimate message here is that we need funding. The Arts Council is not doing their job. They are not doing their job. I should not have to panic and be anxious and slave away at a farm just to get paid for what I've been doing for the last 8 years, and some people even longer. You know, I've made just barely £100 in total for 8 years of professional work. I've done so many open mics and not been paid, and that's not their fault. They also can't afford to pay me because they don't get paid. It's just a chain of people not being paid. Same with journals. You know, a journal can't afford to pay, so then I don't get paid. And then if I start a journal, I can't afford to pay other people. And it's just a consistent chain. Yet you've got these people swanning around at these events and the T.S. Eliot Prize and being given £15,000 here and there and making so much money. Oh yeah, and that's also another thing because they focus on the prize winners. You know, the people that win the big prizes, they only publish because it seems that only the people who win writing prizes matter at all. I've not won a prize yet. Well, technically, third place in a small prize, but I don't win things. I've been shortlisted. Does that mean my work is any less important? Does that mean anyone's work is less important? Franz Kafka died believing nobody would ever care about his work until we did. You know, work matters, but it's up to the people to open their eyes and actually fight for funding. So when you're sitting there thinking, oh, if I speak out against Penguin, they're never going to publish me, we might not have an industry at that point. I understand the risks speaking out, but if we are going to continue to have arts and writing and an industry, we have to speak out. We have to stop letting mediocre people swan around with their success stories, quote unquote, that are really just funded by random hotels and, you know, T.S. Eliot prizes and funding that's dubious to say the least, underhanded backdoor funding, that is then parroted as, oh, such a success story. No, this issue here is precisely what needs to be on BBC Radio 4, The Guardian, The Observer, The Times. It needs to be on the front of every newspaper in this country. But it won't be. But I'm damn sure if I'm gonna, make sure that we get this out there. Because when I started writing and this journey of writing, I had so much hope. I'm going to be this famous writer by the time I'm like 17. You know, I thought, oh, this is going to be so easy. Well, not easy, but I've got this passion. It's going to be rewarded. And I am essentially almost 29, which therefore means I'm almost 30. And barely anybody knows my name for writing outside of indie circles. I haven't made barely a scratch on this industry. And I've been on and off for the past 25 years, but fiercely for the past 8 or 9 coming up. That is shocking. That is not right. It's just not right. The Arts Council needs to do better. They need to make their forms much easier and they need to stop rewarding mediocre people who already have the privilege. Focus on the marginalised people and just focus on the arts in general because they're being selective. People are being underhanded. People are. There's just so much corruption that you don't see behind the scenes in the writing scene when we talk about things. But I know a lot of what goes on, and it needs to change fast. And really, on that note, I'm really just going to end this podcast. But really, what I wanted to end it with is a quote from The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, because I happened to be reading that at the time I've been speaking out, and I found a quote that really kind of relates to it. So this is the quote to end the podcast. I have no patience with the pretensions of would-be poets who contrive, by toadying and underground influences, to get their volumes placed on every drawing-room table. And with that, I want to say thank you for listening. All the relevant links to Rebecca Kenny's post, any other links that will be relevant will be in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please hear what we're saying, and please respond in the comments. If you have any comments, do reach out to me on socials. Courtney Writes, COURTENAYRITES. That's on X and Instagram. Please reach out. But yeah, thank you for listening. I've been your host, Courtney. This has been the Maple Moon Podcast. Goodbye.